This video is going to be part 2 of the Machinist hammer, so we're going to make the handle and get this project finished up. What we've got in the lathe here is a piece of 1-inch diameter stainless. It's about 10 inches long, and we got it set up in the steady rest here. So we're going to face this end off to clean it up, and then we'll drill and tap the center of this. We went ahead and cut a slight center in here so that we can support the workpiece with the tailstock center. We have the steady rest out of our way, and I've got a mark on here. We're going to turn down about 5.5 inches to a diameter of approximately 9/16. This is going to end up going through the wooden handle that we make for the hammer. So both the surface finish on this portion and also the exact diameter aren't all that important. Before we start working on the top half of the hammer handle, we're going to jump back to the hammer head. In the setup you see here, I've got 2 pieces of aluminum that have been turned to the exact same diameter and drilled and tapped so they could be threaded onto the set screws in each side of the hammer head. I put a couple of flats on each end so that I could tighten the whole thing up with a pair of wrenches, and it'll pinch and hold the hammer head solid in between them. Those are sitting in V-blocks, and I indicated along the front of the blocks so I know the whole thing is sitting parallel to the x-axis. I've got an end mill in here. I'm going to come down and put a flat on this somewhere around 3/4 of an inch across, and then I'll use an edge finder to find the exact center of the hammerhead. I can pick up off of the aluminum arbor over here and the edge of the hammerhead. We'll find the exact center and then come in and drill and tap a hole in there. Back over at the lathe, we've got the hammer handle in here spun around, the small diameter sticking through the spindle. I just use a little chunk of copper to tap around this end. This is within a few thousandths down here by the chuck jaws, and we've got it basically about the same out here on the end. Definitely good enough for a hammer handle. So I'm going to slide the steady rest down and get that set up, and then we'll go ahead and face this off, put a small center drill mark in the end of here, and then turn down about a 1/2 inch to a diameter of about a 1/2 inch, and that'll get threaded to screw into the hammer head that we just cut threads into. We're set up to start cutting our threads on the end of this. We're going to do this a little bit differently than normal. We've got the tool bit ground way off center on our tool blank and held upside down in the tool holder. We're going to run the lathe in reverse. You have to be a little bit careful with this if you have a chuck that just threads on like this one does. If you try to take too deep of a cut at a time, you can actually unthread your chuck, and don't know exactly what will happen, but it won't be good. So I'm going to take real shallow cuts, a few thousandths at a time as we thread this. Spring passes in between every now and then, especially once we get to a close to full depth of thread. So we'll move the tool in here, basically bump up against this shoulder, and then infeed until we touch off on the diameter. We'll make our scratch pass, check it, and then start threading. Infeed a little bit on the compound first, bump up against the shoulder over here, and then return the cross slide to 0. Same thing. Infeed the compound first, then we'll bump up to the shoulder and bring the cross slide back into 0. Starts, but just like one thread, so a little bit more. Getting closer. I cut a small radius down in the corner just so that there wasn't the sharp point going all the way around where we started our thread. Threads into here nicely. So now we're ready to start shaping the top half of the hammer handle. Got the pattern set up. I left a couple of flats on here again so that I could use an indicator and make sure this is parallel to the bed of the lathe like I want it. Tracer attachment set up. So let me get this in the chuck and we'll start turning the top section. Let's give it a test fit. Wow, finally starting to look like I had imagined it. So, because we cut the hammerhead with the tracer attachment before I switched the stylus over to the 1/4" bearing, which much closer matched the width of the cutting tool that we were using, the dimension of the center of the hammerhead here in this direction doesn't exactly match the 1.25" stock that we started with. So our flat on here is oval shaped. Looks a little off center, that's because the thread starts over here, but the overall flat is oval shaped, whereas this thing is perfectly round. So what I'm going to do is put some Sharpie on the end of here so that I can see my scribe line better. And I'll throw this in the vise, tighten it up so that I know it's in its fully tightened on location, and then scribe up against in here on both sides. So the front and the back match up pretty darn smooth. It's just the sides that need a little bit taken off of them. So I'll take that off with a file and sort of blend it into the radius until it matches up nicely with the hammerhead. I don't know how well you can see the scribe lines, but I have one over here and then one on the opposite side over there. So I'm going to file down to the line and then fade the radius in. Some tape in case I slip and mess up. So getting closer to match that curve. I'm going to keep working on it a little bit at a time, and then I'll smooth out that radius. I'm happy with the fitment that I have on here now. Blends really nicely between the handle and the hammerhead. And I went ahead and Loctited this together and also Loctited the set screws into each side here. Now it's time for some final assembly. I made this handle out of walnut. To keep this video from getting too long, I made this and I'm going to post it in another video. There should be a card right up here. The video will be out right after the part 2 of the Machinist hammer. This is going to get epoxied onto here. And then it'll have a small cap on the end that holds it in place and kind of finishes off the end of the hammer. Huge thanks to Randy from Randy Richard in the shop. I made these caps off camera and sent them out to him, and he actually engraved them for me with my channel name, Build Fix Create, engraved in there, stainless. So huge thanks, Randy. Really appreciate it. They turned out great. Couldn't be happier. So I'm going to start by epoxying on the handle here. Still has some finish sanding to do to blend these two together, but I want it in its final location epoxied in place before I do any more sanding on there, as well as just down here at the base. Here's the finished hammer, and I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. I think it looks awesome. Got the end cap at the end of the handle there. Again, big thanks Randy for engraving these for me. If you guys follow my channel, you probably already watch his, but if not, you should definitely go and check it out. He does some really neat work. I'll put a link down in the description to his channel. And while I was making this, I actually went ahead and made two. So one will be staying here, and the other one I'm donating to be raffled off at the 2018 Barzy Summer Bash. So hopefully someone there will win it and like it and use it. I hope you guys liked the video. Thanks for watching.